In the middle of the worst blizzard the Midwest had seen in a decade, a young woman didn't close her diner. She opened it wider for a convoy of freezing soldiers who had nowhere else to go. No power, no heat, no idea when help would arrive. She had nothing but a dwindling pot of soup, and the memory of a father long gone. And then, the next morning, something happened that left the entire town speechless. What would you do when survival meant locking the door? But your heart told you to let the cold in. This is the story of a simple woman and a choice that redefined what it means to serve. Her name is Emma Carson. And this was the night everything changed. Emma Carson was 32 and alone in the diner her father had built with calloused hands and late-night coffee. The snow had sealed off the roads, buried the signs, and pushed the world into silence, but she hadn't locked the door. She moved quietly between tables, refilling 2 chipped mugs for the only customers left, a pair of truckers half asleep under heavy coats. She didn't say much. She rarely did. By the window, an old flannel jacket hung over a chair untouched since the day her father passed. She dusted around it, but never moved it. Above the counter, his photo watched over everything Robert Carson, U.S. Marine. Beside it, his words etched in brass, for those still serving. For those still driving. You're home here. Emma glanced up, lips barely moving. Still keeping the light on Dad. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the diner waited warm just barely for whoever came next. The wind screamed louder now, rattling the glass like some ancient warning. Emma had just ladled the last of the soup into 3 mismatched bowls when the front door exploded open, a blast of ice and white and desperation. She ran to close it but froze mid-step. 12 soldiers stood at the threshold. Faces red with cold eyes, wide breath coming in ragged clouds. Snow clung to their uniforms like a second skin. Their sergeant, tall and lean with a gray streak in his hair, stepped forward. "Ma'am," he rasped, "we're with the 302nd. Our convoy's stranded 5 miles out. Engines, radios, all dead. We saw your sign?" "You don't have to ask." Emma interrupted. She tossed a bundle of towels toward them. "Strip off the wet. Kitchen's warmer." They hesitated. "I'm not asking," she said, already walking. No permission, no hesitation. She just opened the door wider. The kitchen smelled faintly of onions and old metal, but to the soldiers it was paradise. Emma led them to the back where the industrial ovens still gave off a dull warmth. They peeled off soaked jackets, steam rising from their sleeves like breath from exhausted bodies. No one spoke, not at first. There was too much cold to shake off too much quiet to break. One by one, they sank into mismatched chairs. Emma didn't ask names. She didn't ask questions. She just moved, ladling soup, slicing, cornbread, reheating what was left of a ham from the back freezer. A few tried to speak. One reached for his wallet. She waved them off. "Food's hot. Don't ask. Just eat." They did fast, quietly, gratefully. And for a moment the storm outside faded. Not because it had passed, but because someone had reminded them what warmth actually felt like. Steam rose from emptied bowls, and warmth had returned not just to the skin but deeper. One soldier, young with a soft southern drawl, nodded toward the counter. "That your dad?" Emma turned slowly. "Yeah." "Robert Carson, 1st Battalion, 3rd Marines." The room quieted as if his name pulled something still from the air. The Sergeant Jake stepped closer, his gaze locked on a list taped beneath the photo. Handwritten names, edges yellowed, carefully kept. "My uncle was 3rd Marines, too." "Da Nang." I remember that handwriting. Emma's fingers grazed the frame. "He wrote those down the year I turned 12. Said if no one remembered their names, it was like they died twice." Jake looked at her, something shifting behind his eyes. "My uncle used to say the same thing. In that moment, it wasn't just a wall, it was a pulse. And Emma could swear. She felt it move. Outside, the storm thickened, a curtain of white swallowing the world. Inside, the generator coughed once, then fell silent. The lights blinked, then died. Emma didn't curse. She simply moved muscle memory. One by one, kerosene lamps were lit, their flames reflecting in the diner windows like tiny echoes of something older. She placed one lamp beneath her father's photo. The glow made his eyes come alive just for a moment, like he was watching, like he approved. In the warehouse, she opened the old steel doors. Back here, she called softly. Truckers and soldiers followed, weary shadows slipping into the converted space. Wooden pallets, cardboard sheets, blankets that once lined booths. Not ideal, but safe. As she handed out mugs of soup and taped cracks in the windows, Emma paused near the names on the wall. She whispered, barely audible, still keeping the fire lit. Dad, and somehow the room felt warmer. The concrete floor radiated cold through the blankets, biting even through thick boots and military gear. Emma moved like a medic, focused, efficient, silent. She checked on each man, topping off mugs, tugging scarves higher, tucking coats around shaking shoulders. Jake stepped in beside her without a word. When a young private began to tremble uncontrollably, Emma knelt beside him, gently pressing a hand to his forehead. His skin was clammy. Fear had sunk deeper than frost. Jake sat on the floor next to him and leaned close. "You ever been to Georgia?" he whispered. Hot, thick summer air, like breathing soup. The kid blinked, barely nodding. "Smells like pine and gasoline. Every time it rained, my brother and I ran barefoot through the fields." His voice was low, steady, not trying to fix, just to hold. Emma watched from across the room, eyes glassy with fatigue, but her hands never stopped moving. Midnight came without fanfare. The storm howled louder, a wild animal clawing at the steel walls. Inside, bodies huddled close, some dozing, others too wired to sleep. The warehouse smelled of wet wool, burnt coffee, and something unspoken trust. Emma's steps were slower now, her fingers raw from cold and washing her eyes red from smoke and sleeplessness. Still, she moved, refilling, checking, watching. A soldier approached her near the ovens, holding out a damp wad of bills. "At least, for the food," he murmured. Emma looked at the money, then at him, young, worn, trying to be polite. "No," she said softly, pushing his hand back. "You served." She glanced toward her father's photo through the open door. "This is my turn." Jake saw it. He didn't say a word. But the way he looked at her, it was a salute in silence. She wasn't a soldier, but no one there outranked her. The wind outside raged like a beast denied. Inside, there was stillness, not from peace, but from pure exhaustion. Jake sat near the warehouse door, legs stretched out, eyes half-lidded. Across the room, Emma leaned against a shelf stacked with dented cans and dusty boxes of instant soup. Her head rested briefly against cold metal. No one spoke. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of breath of gratitude, of survival. A battered Labrador curled beneath a pile of coat's tail thumping once in a dream. A trucker muttered softly in his sleep something about home. One soldier clutched a mug of cooling coffee like a lifeline. Emma blinked slowly, eyelids heavy. Then a faint smile. Not from joy, from knowing. For one night she had given them what no ration or weapon could have placed to rest without fear. And outside, half buried under snow, the diner's sign still flickered. Open late. Word travels fastest in desperation. Some say it was a trucker's radio, others blame luck. But by 100 a.m., headlights began appearing through the storm, faint, flickering, and slow. More engines, more strangers. Emma stood at the warehouse door, arms folded, watching tired figures push against the snowdrifts. A woman in a reflective vest. An older man limping beside a teenage driver. A child clinging to a too small backpack. She didn't ask why they came. She didn't have to. She just made space. More pallets, more blankets. More soup watered down now, but warm. The warehouse, once a forgotten storage room, transformed. A sanctuary built from leftovers and stubbornness. Jake worked beside her, guiding people in checking frostbitten fingers, taping plastic over broken panes. No announcements, no orders, just action. And somewhere deep in the storm, someone else saw the flicker of light and turned the wheel toward it. The beacon was working. As the warehouse filled, so did the silence, not the hollow kind, but the sacred. A dozen strangers wrapped in coats and shared breath drawn together by cold coffee and something older. Near the back wall, the photo of Robert Carson caught the warm glow of a kerosene lamp. One of the soldiers, quiet older with weathered eyes, paused in front of it. He bent slightly, reading the list of names taped beside it. Names of men lost. Friends, maybe. Brothers. Jake noticed and joined him. "You know any of them?" he asked softly. The man nodded. "Two, and I knew the man who wrote them down." Emma watched from the kitchen doorway. She didn't interrupt. Instead, she wiped her hands on her apron, crossed the room, and gently straightened the list. Not a word spoken. Just a look, exchanged grief, recognized honored. This place didn't forget. It refused to. The storm pressed harder against the walls as if trying to remind them it was still there. But inside, something softer had taken root. Jake found Emma sitting on an overturned crate near the ovens, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug. For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the low hiss of the pilot light and the occasional creak of snow shifting on the roof. Then Jake said, "First time we got hit in Fallujah, my best friend was 5 feet from me." Then he wasn't. Emma didn't flinch. She nodded once. "My dad said he stopped hearing gunfire one day because the screaming was louder." Jake looked at her, really looked. What was he like? She didn't answer at first. Then quiet, kind, a little broken. But he built this place so no one else had to carry it alone. They sat in the hush that followed, and the fire kept burning. Emma stared into the glow of the oven, her voice barely above a whisper. "He never talked much about the war, just the parts that hurt less, mostly about the guys he couldn't bring home." Jake nodded slowly. "A lot of us do that. We bury what we can't fix." Emma took a sip from her mug, eyes distant. "He started this place after he got back. Said he wanted to build something that couldn't be destroyed. A warm meal, a hot shower, a safe stop for anyone lost or tired." Jake looked around at the pallets, the patchwork blankets, the quiet breath of sleeping strangers. "I'd say he did." She smiled, soft and tired. "Sometimes I wonder." Jake leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You kept it open even when the storm said shut it down. That's not just duty, Emma. That's legacy." She didn't respond. But in that moment, she believed him. Just before dawn, the stillness shattered. A sharp crack echoed through the warehouse, sudden violent. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then water burst from a pipe above the bathroom, gushing across the concrete like a wound. Within seconds, it began to freeze, turning the floor into a sheet of ice. Emma was already moving. She sprinted toward the back wall, wrenching the shut-off valve with both hands. Jake grabbed towels, pressing them down in wide sweeps. Around them, tension rippled, low murmurs, anxious glances. A trucker muttered about the radio warning of a grid failure. A woman in a reflective vest whispered that gas lines were freezing. A teenager curled into a tighter ball, eyes wide with fear. Someone said, "We should have stayed with the convoy." Emma stood on a milk crate, her voice cutting through the noise, calm, steady, grounded. "We have heat, we have shelter, and most of all, we have each other." Her words didn't erase the fear, but they stopped it from spreading. Jake moved through the room like a steady current, checking on the most shaken, offering nods, brief touches on shoulders, quiet reminders that they were safe. His calm was contagious. Emma climbed down from the crate, her legs trembling slightly, but her posture never broke. She returned to the kitchen, fingers shaking as she refilled the coffee urn with the last of the hot water. There on the counter was a paper menu. It hadn't been there before. Scrawled in pen across the back in a hand she almost recognized, "Thanks for keeping the fire lit." R.C. Emma froze. Her father's initials, his old way of signing notes. She stared for a long moment, then folded it carefully, pressed it to her chest, and slipped it into her apron. Maybe it was coincidence, maybe not. Either way, she wasn't alone. Emma's body had reached its edge. Her hands were raw boots, soaked eyelids heavy as stone. She leaned against the prep counter, watching the steam rise from the urn like ghosts drifting toward the ceiling. Jake appeared beside her, quiet as always. "You need to sleep," he said gently. She shook her head, almost out of instinct. "I can't. Too much to—" "Yes," he interrupted, steady. "You can. Just 10 minutes. I'll keep it going." Emma looked at him, really looked. There was no pity in his face, just presence. Confidence. Calm. She hesitated, then nodded. "No more than 10, she whispered. Jake led her into the office behind the kitchen. No blankets, no pillow, just a narrow cot against the wall. She lay down, fully dressed, boots still on. Before her eyes closed, she whispered, "Don't let the coffee burn." Jake smiled, stepped into the doorway like a quiet sentry, and kept watch. The first sound that broke the stillness of morning wasn't wind. It was engines. Low, deep, rhythmic. The warehouse walls shuddered faintly, not from the storm, but from movement outside. Tires crunching through snow, the mechanical groan of something alive pushing through the ice. Emma stirred, eyes snapping open. She sat up fast, boots already on coat half-zipped. Her heart beat quicker than her thoughts. She stepped into the hallway, blinking against the brightness filtering through the frosted diner windows. Jake met her halfway. "They're here," he said simply. Together they pushed open the diner doors. Outside, 4 camouflaged Humvees rolled through waist-high snow. Behind them, 2 armored supply trucks rumbled forward, engines steaming in the cold like beasts from another world. From one vehicle, a soldier jumped down and waved for space. Another rolled out a portable generator. And then, the lead Humvee's door opened. Help had arrived. But it didn't feel like rescue yet. Out of the lead Humvee stepped a man built like a command post. Colonel Nathaniel Wolfe. Broad-shouldered, clean-cut posture, sharp enough to slice through fog. His boots landed with force, each step crunching against packed snow. Mirrored sunglasses reflected the battered diner like it was a checkpoint in enemy territory. He didn't wait for permission. He strode inside. "Who's in charge here?" he barked. Emma stepped forward without hesitation. "I am." Wolfe scanned her wind-burned cheeks, red-rimmed eyes, hair in a loose braid tucked into a grease-stained coat. Not what he expected. He gestured toward the warehouse. "What is this?" "Some kind of civilian relief camp." Emma's voice didn't waver. "No, this is a truck stop. My father built it. When the storm came, we stayed open." From behind her, Jake emerged. Wolfe narrowed his eyes. "Morrow," he muttered. Should have known. The air thickened. This wasn't over, not yet. Colonel Wolfe pushed past them, boots thudding on the concrete as he entered the warehouse. His eyes moved fast, taking in pallets turned into beds, blankets folded into makeshift walls, people sleeping shoulder to shoulder, a dog curled beneath a coat. He stopped in the center, arms crossed. "You're telling me," he said, voice flat, 30 civilians, a dozen of my soldiers, and a stray dog are sleeping on the floor of your storage room." He turned to Emma. "And nothing's gone wrong." Emma didn't blink. "We've had frozen pipes, 2 panic attacks, 1 trucker nearly passed out from dehydration." She stepped closer. "But no fights, no theft, no one turned away. We managed." Wolfe said nothing for a moment. Then he walked to the far wall to the photo of Robert Carson. "What unit?" Emma answered quietly. 101st, Firebase Ripcord. The colonel paused. "I remember that name," and his voice softened just enough to matter. For the first time, Colonel Wolfe didn't speak like a commander. He stared at the photo, Robert Carson in full dress uniform standing proud beneath a folded flag. A wall of names beside it, handwritten and yellowed at the edges. "He was there," Wolfe said, barely audible. "Ripcord. I lost 2 fingers, most of my hearing. He helped pull me out." He turned, pulled an envelope from inside his coat, thick, official sealed. "For services rendered," he said, holding it out. Emma didn't reach for it. "I'm not taking your money. It's not charity. No," she said, voice firm but quiet. "It's duty. just like it was his. Wolf studied her. For a long moment, no one moved. Then he tucked the envelope back into his coat. "All right," he said slowly. "What if we make a deal?" Emma's brow lifted. "A fair one," he added. And just like that, the tone changed. Colonel Wolf didn't posture now. He spoke like a man who saw the value of what stood before him, not just a warehouse, but a sanctuary held together by grit and grace. "Let the Army use this place," he said. "Temporary supply depot. In return, we'll bring in real beds medics' fuel food, fix the roof, reinforce insulation. No one freezes before this storm breaks." Emma crossed her arms, weighing the offer. "And afterward, we pull out, quietly. You get your place back stronger." She glanced around the diner. The faded booths, the chipped counters, her father's flannel still hanging by the window, then back at Wolf. "I want the plaque to stay," she said. "The names, the photo." Wolf nodded. "Non-negotiable." Emma extended her hand. Calloused met calloused. Soldier met civilian. Deal. And in that handshake a truck stop became something else entirely, a line in the snow no one would cross. By midday the warehouse buzzed like a field operation, but warmer, more human. Army engineers arrived first unloading lumber thermal blankets and barrels of fuel. Soldiers and truckers worked side by side clearing snow, hauling supplies, lifting broken panels from the roof like peeling away the worst of the storm. Inside, medics set up a corner triage unit. Someone rigged power to the coffee urn. A generator hummed in the background, steady, reliable. Emma moved through it all like quiet gravity. She stirred soup, taped cardboard over the last broken window, handed out socks without fanfare. People had stopped calling her ma'am with uncertainty. Now it came with a nod with respect, like she wore invisible stripes. Jake coordinated with precision, directing arrivals like a seasoned captain. But every few minutes his eyes found Emma's. Not to check in, just to anchor. The place was changing, and so were they. Word spread faster than the snow could fall. By late afternoon they started arriving not from the highway but from town. Veterans in heavy coats, retired truckers with thermoses and toolboxes, a woman from the bakery down the road, arms full of warm bread. No orders, no expectations, just help. One elderly Marine shuffled in, dragging 2 grandkids behind him and a snow shovel slung over his shoulder. "Where do you need us?" he asked, voice hoarse but steady. Emma blinked fast, caught off guard. She pointed to the sidewalk buried in drifts. "Out front, if you don't mind." The man nodded once and went to work. Inside, someone found an old folding table and set up a card game. A teenage girl passed out wax paper sandwiches. A dog barked once, tail wagging. Jake leaned close to Emma. "You did this." She shook her head, slowly, eyes on her father's photo. "No, he did." Jake smiled. "Maybe, but you brought it back to life." By nightfall, the warehouse no longer looked like storage. It felt like something sacred. Heat lamps cast a golden glow across the concrete floor. Cots lined in clean rows. Steam from hot soup rose like incense. Somewhere, someone strummed a guitar, off-key, but full of heart. Emma stood in the diner's doorway, hands on her hips, watching it all. No one needed instructions, now everyone moved with quiet rhythm as if they'd always belonged here. A soldier gently tucked a blanket around a sleeping child. A trucker laughed at a joke no one else heard. Jake stood by the back doors, clipboard in hand, smile, soft eyes on Emma. "You're not running it anymore," he said, stepping beside her. She nodded, a quiet breath escaping her lips. "I don't have to." Outside, the storm still lingered, but inside, Kingston's stop pulsed with something deeper than warmth. It pulsed with purpose, with people, with home. The hum of quiet voices and soft laughter faded as Emma slipped back into the diner alone. The booths were empty now, the lights low. She poured herself a mug of coffee, thick, slightly burned, and cradled it in both hands like a small campfire. She sat at the counter across from her father's photo, the same stool he always used. For a moment she let her shoulders drop the weight slide off. No orders to give, no fires to put out. Her eyes wandered to the flannel still draped over the chair by the window. She reached over, smoothed the fabric gently, then smiled. It wasn't joy. Not exactly. It was something quieter, the peace that comes when you've done all you can and it was enough. No medals, no headlines, just warmth. Outside, the wind still howled. But inside this little diner, the storm had lost its power. The windows shook gently in their frames, but no one flinched anymore. The storm was still there, relentless, swirling loud, but it remained outside. Like a defeated intruder that no longer scared the house it once tried to break. Emma stepped out of the diner and into the warehouse again. A soldier nodded at her with a grin, mouth full of cornbread. A little girl waved from a cot beside her grandfather. The old dog lifted its head, thumped its tail twice, then settled back in. She moved slowly now, not from exhaustion but from presence, touching shoulders, offering smiles, fixing a scarf with the quiet tenderness of someone who knew what it meant to go unnoticed. Jake joined her at the coffee station, refilling thermoses without a word. When their eyes met, nothing was said. Nothing needed to be. The storm could rage all night. It wouldn't get in. Not anymore. Later, in a lull between tasks, Emma found Jake near the back loading dock tying down a tarp to block a fresh draft of wind. She handed him a thermos. Still hot. He took it with a nod. "You ever think this is what your dad wanted? This kind of night?" Emma leaned against the wall, arms folded. He never said, but maybe. He always talked about building something that would outlast him. Jake sipped slowly. He did. And you're still carrying it. She looked down at her hands, cracked, stained with coffee soup and effort. Sometimes it feels heavy. Jake smiled, not unkindly. That's how you know it matters. A long pause settled between them, not uncomfortable, just full. Outside, the wind wailed. Inside, two people stood shoulder to shoulder in a storm not quite their own, but one they'd chosen to face together. Not as heroes, as humans. Just after 4 a.m., the back entrance groaned under snow and pressure and gave. A blast of wind roared into the warehouse, scattering paper, slamming a door, and drawing a gasp from the room. Someone shouted. A baby started crying. Panic rippled like a sudden wave. A soldier stood tense. "We need to move them. This place isn't secure." Emma didn't hesitate. She climbed onto a folding chair, rising above the chaos, her voice clear and steady, not loud but firm enough to cut through fear. "Stop!" All eyes turned. "We're not running. We've been through worse in the last 12 hours than most see in a year, and we're still standing." She pointed toward the flapping tarp. "We fix that, then we check on the ones who look scared. Then we breathe." Silence. Then Jake's voice from below, "You heard the lady." Emma stepped down, and the storm retreated not outside, but inside them. The adrenaline faded, replaced by fatigue that sank deep into Emma's bones. She made her way back to the diner alone. Footsteps slow, the quiet pressing in like a warm blanket. On the counter, where no one had placed anything before, lay a folded piece of paper. It was an old menu, yellowed edges curled. Someone had scrawled across the back in blocky, familiar handwriting. "Thanks for keeping the fire lit, R.C." Emma stared. Her breath caught. She touched the paper like it might disappear. Her father's initials, his words, his voice suddenly so close. Tears welled but didn't fall. Instead, she smiled, small, cracked but real. A smile that knew grief could visit gently too. She folded the note with both hands and tucked it into her apron pocket over her heart. Maybe someone left it as a gesture. Maybe not. Either way, it was exactly when she needed it most. By the time Emma stepped back into the warehouse, her steps faltered. She gripped the doorframe not from fear, but pure exhaustion. Her body had given all it could. Jake saw it instantly. "You're done for now," he said gently. "I can still—" "No," he said, stepping closer. "You led us through the worst night of our lives. Now let someone else carry the torch." She opened her mouth to protest, but the fight wasn't there. He guided her to a cot tucked in the corner, fresh blanket, soft light nearby. No fanfare, just care. She lay down, fully dressed, boots still on arms crossed over her chest. Before closing her eyes, she looked up at him. 10 minutes, she murmured. Jake smiled, pulled the blanket over her shoulder. I'll wake you. She drifted off before he finished the sentence. Outside, the storm still whispered, but inside. For Emma Carson, there was peace. The sun hadn't fully risen, but something brighter had arrived. Engines. Big ones. The ground trembled slightly beneath the warehouse floor, not from wind this time, but from movement. Order presence. Heavy tires crunched through deep snow. The distinct thump of boots coordinated and precise echoed outside. Jake stood by the diner door watching as 4 camouflaged Humvees and 2 armored trucks rolled to a halt. Diesel engines hissed and rumbled. One soldier jumped down, motioned for space. Another began unloading a portable generator with practiced hands. Jake turned just in time to see Emma stir on the cot. Eyes opened. Alert despite sleep's short visit. He met her halfway down the hall. "They're here," he said. Emma nodded, rubbing her eyes, then pulled her coat tighter and zipped it fully. Relief didn't show on her face, only focus. The storm had taken everything. Now came the question. What would they build in its wake? The lead Humvee's door opened with a mechanical groan, and Colonel Nathaniel Wolfe stepped out again, this time with purpose, not suspicion. His coat snapped in the wind as he moved across the snow like a man reclaiming territory. Behind him, aides carried clipboards, radios, and silent expectations. He entered the diner without knocking, scanning the room with a battlefield gaze. The warmth, the mess, the smell of burned coffee, it all landed on him in one breath. He found Emma standing behind the counter, steady as before, eyes tired but calm. He didn't wait. "What you've done here," he said, voice low but edged with disbelief, "is unprecedented." Emma raised an eyebrow. "It's just soup, blankets, and a roof." Wolfe stepped forward. "No, it's command without command. You held together civilians and soldiers without rank, without orders." A pause. "And they listened to you." She didn't smile. She simply said, "Because I stayed." Colonel Wolfe studied her not with authority now, but with something closer to respect. Emma didn't fill the silence. She didn't need to. Around them, people moved, pouring coffee, folding blankets, checking fuel levels, but no one interrupted. The center held. "You know," Wolfe said, adjusting his gloves, "I've commanded platoons through combat zones, disaster zones, and worse. But I've never seen cohesion like this without structure." Emma shrugged lightly. "Sometimes people just need to see someone stay standing." He looked toward the warehouse where a soldier helped a trucker zip his coat. A child giggled as she shared her last cookie with a medic. No one barked orders. Everyone moved with quiet rhythm. Wolfe turned back. "Your father. He would have been proud." Emma glanced at the flannel still on the chair by the window. "I hope so." Wolfe gave a nod, not military, not formal, just human, and that was enough. Wolfe reached into his coat and pulled out a small wooden box, polished but weathered by time. He opened it slowly, revealing a bronze star nestled in deep blue velvet. Its surface gleamed faintly in the morning light, edges catching the reflection of the diner's worn windows. "Years ago," he said quietly, "your father was recommended for this. It got buried paperwork politics. But I served with the men who vouched for him. I know what he did." He placed the box gently on the counter in front of Emma. Emma's hands trembled as she reached for it. Her fingers brushed the metal slow and reverent, like touching a memory made solid. She didn't speak, didn't have to. Behind her, the room had gone still. Soldiers stood, truckers straightened in their chairs. Even the old dog lifted its head. No applause, no speeches, just silence, the kind reserved for things that truly matter. Emma stood frozen, the metal in her palm, its weight far more than metal. Her throat tightened, eyes shimmering but dry. Around her, breath held. No one moved. Then Jake stepped forward. He didn't say a word, just straightened heels together, hand to brow. A salute. One by one, others followed. Soldiers in uniform, truckers in flannel, a teenage girl still wearing borrowed boots, an elderly veteran with trembling hands. Even a medic paused mid-bandage to turn and face her. It wasn't practiced. It wasn't polished. It was pure. Emma's chin quivered, but she didn't look away. She stood tall, shoulders back, not as a commander, but as a daughter, a keeper, a witness to something greater than herself. After a long moment, she finally found her voice low, raw, steady. He always said the war didn't define him. Helping people did. She looked at them all. Thank you for letting me do the same. By mid-morning, the convoy was ready to roll. Engines, rumbled tires cracked the frozen snowpack, and the scent of diesel mixed with the last wisps of wood smoke. One by one, Humvees pulled away from Kingston's stop, each pausing at the diner's front window to give a soft honk a goodbye without words. Emma stood outside, bundled in her coat snow to her calves. She raised a gloved hand in farewell, not waving, just holding it steady, a silent blessing. Jake helped an elderly veteran strap down a tarp, then walked alongside the last truck, his shoulders relaxed in a way Emma hadn't seen before. Only one vehicle remained, a flatbed with an Army engineering crew. They worked quietly, reverently at the far corner of the lot. Emma tilted her head. Jake smiled. They've got one more thing to install. She watched in silence, heart still. She didn't know what it was. Not yet. When the crew finished, they waved Emma over. At the base of the old flagpole, the one her father had raised every Sunday before the lunch rush, something new now stood bolted into the concrete still dusted with snow. A bronze plaque. Simple. Beautiful. She knelt down, brushing away the frost with one bare hand. Her breath caught as the words came into view. Kingston, stop where no one freezes on our watch. No dedication, no ceremony. Just truth. Her fingers lingered on the cold metal. She didn't speak, couldn't, but something settled in her chest. Not closure, not quite, just belonging. Jake stood nearby, not intruding. The wind had softened, now the storm finally breaking apart over distant hills. Sunlight spilled across the plaque, catching on its edges, turning bronze to gold for a fleeting moment. Emma rose slowly, and for the first time in days, she exhaled without weight. Later that morning, the warehouse was still. No more pallets, no more boots stomping or radios crackling. The blankets were folded coffee urns rinsed, and the hum of life had faded into soft echoes. Emma moved through the diner in silence, wiping counters, resetting chairs, not because she had to, but because it grounded her. She poured herself a fresh mug of coffee, sat at the counter, and looked around. Normal had returned, or something close to it. The flannel shirt still hung on the back of her father's favorite chair. She didn't move it. Outside, the road was clearing. A pair of trucks passed by slowly, their engines steady. One gave a soft honk, not to alert, but to remember. Emma smiled, raised her mug in reply. No words, no drama, just breath and sunlight and the kind of quiet that follows something sacred. The storm had passed, but the warmth remained. Emma stepped outside, mug in hand, boots crunching into packed snow. The air was crisp, touched with the clean chill that follows a storm. Above her, the sky stretched open, pale blue, endless. She sat on the old wooden bench beside the flagpole just beneath the new plaque. Her breath rose in silver ribbons curling into the morning. She didn't speak. She just listened to the hum of distant tires on asphalt, to the creak of her father's sign swaying gently in the breeze. Kingston, stop hot meals. Open late. Every sound felt familiar now. Every silence earned. In each engine rumble she heard his voice. In each passing trucker she saw the dream he left behind, not of a business but a place that stayed lit for the lost. She closed her eyes briefly, not to sleep, but to remember, because what mattered had never left. It had simply found new hands. This wasn't a rescue story. It wasn't about heroism in the traditional sense. It was about soup and coffee and one woman who didn't close her doors when the world told her she should. Emma Carson never asked for recognition. She didn't plan to lead. She simply stayed when it mattered most, and because she did, strangers became family. A diner became a refuge, and a father's quiet legacy became something living. The storm passed, but the warmth, the kind made of small kindnesses and steady hands that stayed behind. If you were Emma, would you have opened the door? Would you have kept the fire lit? Let us know below. And if this story reminded you of someone, a parent, a friend, or even yourself, share it. Because the world needs more places like Kingston Stop, and more people like her. See you in the next story.